So another week means another chapter of Kubo's brand new series, Burn the Witch, and apparently we are coming near to the end of this series now, as it is supposedly only 4 chapters long, at least for now anyway, and this is now chapter 3, She Makes Me Special. And as far as these chapters have been so far, this is definitely my favourite, I think. It's the most action-packed, and whenever the action is on screen, it really reminds me of reading Bleach, which I absolutely love, and the character designs are completely on point here. We get to see another member of the Top of Horns properly for the first time, and I love the designs on show so far. The world building Kubo is doing here, the characters he's continuing to introduce and flesh out makes me really hope that there is more to Burn the Witch than just these 4 chapters. But for now, this is what we've got, so let's get into this review. Before we begin, however, guys, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to do so. You'll be in the best place on YouTube for Bleach content and Burn the Witch content, and you'll get those videos in your sub box every single week. Make sure to hit the notification bell as well to stay up to date with all of the videos, and become a part of the wider community by following me on Twitter. The name should be appearing on the screen below, and also joining the Discord, the link to which you can find in the description of the video. The chapter starts out with another colour page. We're getting one every single week, and so far it does appear they're all going to be of the 2 main girls, Noel and Ninnie. I like this one a lot. There's a kind of washed out colour palette going on that actually reminds me of an image of the Bambis that Kubo put in Bleach Jet. It looks kind of similar, very detailed background, and overall I really like it. I would love to see some other characters showcased in these colour pages, but I suspect it'll probably be just these 2. Now, the chapter opens really interestingly, and certainly not in a way I had anticipated. It actually begins with their superior, Billy Banks Jr. Now, I really like Billy, as I've mentioned in my previous reviews. I hope he gets to do something awesome by the end of this series, because his design is fantastic. He gives off a huge Urahara vibe, a bit of a Kyoraku vibe, and that is such a good mix for me. I think he's up to something, but Kubo has played him up to be very goofy so far, more so than he was in the pilot chapter anyway, but I think something is lurking under the surface there. Anyway, the chapter opens with Billy apparently trying to sneak into, or possibly eavesdrop on, a group known as the Crown Council. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've not actually heard of the Crown Council before. I think they're a separate group to the Top of Horns, who are also known as the Supreme Powers at Be. So in my opinion, the Crown Council then is probably going to be the governing body, similar to the Central 46. They're the guys who make the decisions, they make the laws. And so I'm wondering then, why is Billy here? Now, he's actually interrupted by Sullivan Squire, who is the leader of the Sabres division and his previous boss, apart from he got apparently kicked out of the group, although there'll be more on that in a minute. Now, this is the first time we get to see Sullivan properly since her introduction in Chapter 1, and I have to say, I'm loving the design. She's probably one of the coolest looking members of the Top of Horns. Very militaristic, very Vandenreich even from Bleach. And I just love the way this character looks. One thing I do find a little bit weird about this scene though is how it was actually set up. Billy has clearly snuck into this building with the intent of trying to sneak into this room, but Sullivan and her right-hand man are just standing with their backs against the wall. So that tells me that they've been there a little while. So Billy must have tried to sneak past them, but maybe didn't realise they were there. I'm not entirely sure how that came about, but they do have an interesting conversation nonetheless. Sullivan basically says to Billy that when you left my division, you didn't say goodbye when you transferred. So to be honest, I don't know what a man of your caliber would want with the Crown Council. This, to me, is pretty interesting, as it seems to contradict the situation we found out about Billy in Chapter 1. Ninnie said that Billy was demoted from the Sabres because he didn't do any work, but the way Sullivan words this, that Billy didn't say goodbye to her when he transferred, kind of implies to me that maybe Billy transferred himself, and that he actually chose to leave the Sabres. Maybe I'm reading into it a bit too deeply, but perhaps Billy wanted to be back in the Pipers to look after Noel and Ninnie as some kind of fatherly figure perhaps for these characters. I'm not entirely sure. But regardless, it seems to me at least that he left the Sabres of his own accord. Billy tries to lie to her, however, and says that actually he has come to try and find her so that he can say goodbye after leaving, but Sullivan sees right through it and instead wonders if perhaps Billy knows about the predicament that Noel and Ninnie have found themselves in. This is of course referring to the fact that Bruno Bang Knife has just attacked them at the newspaper at the end of last week's chapter. But Billy is playing dumb here, or at the very least he possibly doesn't actually know about that. But I really do think that this character is similar to Urahara. He's got a lot of fingers in a lot of pies and he knows a lot about what's going on around the world. I assume he knows that something is going on. Why is he at the Crown Council? I don't know. And my personal reasoning, what I've come up with so far, is that maybe he is aware of the fact that Balgo, the order is to exterminate him, is out, and or it's not out yet, but it has been formalized by the Top of Horns, and that Billy has arrived at the Crown Council to maybe somehow stop it from happening, or to at least interfere. Regardless, however, Billy, I think he's definitely up to something, and I really hope that this start of this chapter is setting up for him to do something awesome in the last chapter of the series, so far at least. When you read enough of Kubo's work, you can notice the telltale signs. Billy says, "Oh no, I didn't know, has something happened to them?" And you get a close-up of Sullivan's eye. She's clearly very suspicious of his true intentions, and definitely doesn't believe him when he says that. But then she does go on to say that maybe I've given you too much credit, and she proceeds to tell him about the order to execute Balgo, and the fact that Ninnie and Noel are being attacked by Bruno. I like this brief insight into Sullivan as a character. She does seem to be the calm, quiet, reserved character that you probably would have garnered but just by looking at her and her expressions. But it's nice that she decided to kind of almost help Billy and give him a bit of a head start. There's some kind of honour to that, and I do appreciate that in her character. She essentially tells Billy to look out for Noel and Ninnie and to go and save them from Bruno, so I'm really hoping he does show up next week. She then tells her subordinate Arcvine to leave, and he agrees, and they both go. And Arcvine seems to have a completely new design. The guy looks completely distinguished, and this is what I mean by Kubo continuing to create characters for this world, adding more people every single week. I can't believe he wants to be done with this in 4 chapters. There's so much world building going on. It feels like he wants to flesh out the divisions just as much as the Gote, but regardless, Sullivan and Arcvine leave, and Billy says that things are starting to get a bit complicated. We then move over to the main event, which is, of course, Noel and Ninnie versus Bruno. Bruno looking more like Basby by the panel, but he does say that he's not trying to kill them, he is only there for Balgo. And you have to remember that the Top of Horns, at least currently, are not really villains. They are more people in a position of authority that are just trying to get a job done. Although it is clear from events, at least further on in this chapter, that I would say Wingbind is definitely more corrupt than the Gote, and that was pretty hard to do. We do get some funny dialogue between Noel and Bruno, and I do think Noel's deadpan personality really comes out well here. Bruno says that he's expecting her to recognise him. She actually doesn't, which I thought was quite funny, but Ninnie does, and she points out that he is one of the leaders of the Top of Horns, the division known as the Magic Circle Inks. Bruno then puts in a call to have the whole area put into lockdown because a terrorist has just attacked the newspaper and Balgo is the culprit. And I did suspect that this might happen last week in my review. I thought that the Top of Horns might try and justify their actions by framing Balgo for the attack on the newspaper. This is pretty bad stuff. Like, I know I said earlier they weren't villains, but this is definitely a pretty evil thing to do, and this is what I mean by them being more corrupt. Again, I feel like they're probably acting on the idea of the ends justifying the means, but Bruno at least appears to be acting out of some kind of selfishness, because Sullivan mentions early on that the order hasn't officially been put out yet, but Bruno's already on the move. And Bruno even says later on that the reason he's doing this, the reason he's trying to kill Balgo before the others can get to him, is because he'll go down forever in history as being the guy who took him out. So Bruno's definitely acting selfishly here when he's trying to take down Balgo. One thing I think is interesting and maybe worth pointing out, Bruno is the leader of the group known colloquially as the Inks, so I wonder if that is actually directly involved with the newspaper printing in Reverse London. Bruno is keen to remind them, however, that he is well within the law to be doing what he's doing, and as long as the two of them don't interfere, he has no need to kill them. We then get pretty much my favourite part of the chapter, and I genuinely wasn't expecting this at all, but Noel basically turns around to Bruno and says that your dye job is really cringe. And I just wasn't expecting it. It genuinely made me laugh out loud. It's the funniest thing I've seen so far in Burn the Witch. And Bruno's reaction is hilarious. It reminds me, it has to be a callback to Renji insulting Basby's mohawk. And Bruno so far has looked like Basby a lot, but in this panel alone, he resembles Askin so much. I had to do a bit of a double take with him pulling the obviously really over the top, almost JoJo-like expression. That's very Askin. And even his eyebrows look like they connect at the corners, just like Askin's did. I had to double take, but I love this panel. I just love the fact that she says to him, your hair dye is really cringe, and he freaks out about it. Very Basby. We then get the title page, and it's just a picture of Balgo and Osushi. Osushi looking continually very cute. This time he's got a little mantle on, which I really, really liked. And I want to talk quickly about Balgo, because I've mentioned him briefly in previous reviews as being my least favourite part of Burn the Witch. I find him to be really annoying, really grating, and just completely unfunny. However, I actually prefer him in this chapter, and maybe that's because he doesn't do as much, but actually I like it when he's a bit more reserved, a bit more naive, and a bit more innocent than just being kind of weird and creepy. I like him in this chapter, though. I think it's a better angle for the character to be less on the nose, to be a little bit more in the background, but also like totally innocent. I actually quite like that. We get to the meat of the chapter though, when we get some action now, and there seems to be a big shockwave erupting around Bruno, and at first I was like, is this his own ability? Can he like cause explosions or shockwaves? And it dawned on me, maybe it's his dragon, but considering we're in reverse London, there's no reason for us not to be able to see the dragon at this point. But then, later on in the chapter, he does seemingly summon a dragon, so whether that dragon is doing the damage or not, I don't really know. I'm not entirely sure yet as to the extent of how these characters actually do battle. We know that Noel and Ninnie use witch kits, which is essentially guns, to fight with, but we've never seen anyone else do any fighting, so whether Bruno has any powers of his own, he is a wizard, so I'd assume so. And the thing is, he rides the dragon later on, and this is all something we'll get into later, so I wonder if the dragon is just his broom buggy. Obviously a pretty badass one, but for now, I'm not entirely sure who's doing the fighting, if it's the dragon or Bruno, but either way, it's pretty dangerous. Bruno pulls some very Basby faces as he gets madder and madder, but he basically summons a bunch of thugs to capture Balgo down below, saying that they'll recognise him because of his Piper's mantle, revealing that actually Bruno set everything up to approve Balgo being given the Piper's mantle in the first place, so they could eventually single him out. However, Noel moves on the offensive and she fires some kind of ability that basically dispenses everyone but Balgo, sends the thugs flying, and then she grabs him and they take off to try and fly away. Meanwhile, Ninnie actually goes on the offensive as well, but in a slightly different fashion. She appears behind Bruno and points a gun at his head and basically starts questioning him. It's honestly pretty cool stuff, and it does confirm some of the theories I had from last week as well, that Macy Baldur was not working alone and someone did essentially set her up to bring the dragon here, give her the knowledge she needed, and then, start the situation rolling. Bruno reveals that it was all him essentially, that he didn't actually give her the dragon, which is interesting, but he did bring her to reverse London and set the whole scene up. We then get an interesting tidbit of lore. We're not supposed to think that Macy can see dragons being a regular human, but Bruno actually reveals that she found the dragon as an infant and raised it herself, which shocks Ninnie. Bruno reveals that she is a special type of human born in front London known as a Watcher, who can actually see dragons despite being a regular human. He then reveals that maybe she would have made her way to reverse London anyway, much the same as Noel and Ninnie. So this probably confirms that the two of them were originally from Front London, but as Watchers they could see dragons and therefore were recruited into Wingbind. I assume Ninnie basically kept her job as a pop idol, whereas we know from the pilot chapter that Noel is still currently in school. So I assume they are still living their lives in Front London, but they just work in Reverse London. They were recruited because of their abilities as Watchers. We then get a really nice piece of choreography here. Basically, this revelation shocks Ninnie, but it allows Bruno to get a one-up on her, and he kind of spins around and kicks the gun straight out of her hand, and it spirals up into the air. However, it's caught by Noel, who flies above them and basically double taps Bruno with this really cool dual-wield move where she just completely decimates the top of the building. And I also love the fact that Noel doesn't seem to really care that Ninnie and Macy are right there. She just destroys the top of the building, no problem. It's a really nice bit of action, and I think some of these panels must be setting up events for next week, I assume anyway. The explosion gives Ninnie a chance to escape and grab Macy and take her away from there, leaving Ellie the dragon behind. There's an interesting panel where Kubo seems to focus on this in particular. When Ninnie grabs Macy, there's almost looks like bringer light, but I'm sure it's probably not, but some kind of energy appears. And I'm not sure if this is going to be some kind of manifestation of Macy having witch powers or something like that. I don't really know what that's all about. But the fact that Ellie gets left behind and Macy's very unhappy about that, again, makes me think that maybe Ellie is going to arrive next week and help fight off Bruno's dragon. Bruno then summons his dragon just as Noel and Ninnie are escaping, and his dragon's name is Rickenbacker, which is actually a really cool name. And again, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. Is the dragon just invisible and he's making it visible? Is he summoning it from somewhere, almost like a full bring? But either way, there's like black flame or black energy appears, and this huge dragon appears behind him, which does look really cool. and he basically says that they're naive for thinking they can get away. We then get a nice couple of moments with the main team. Noel has set up a cloth, which is essentially a kind of barrier that should be shielding them from perception. They shouldn't be able to be found. And we get a bit of development for Macy, which honestly I wasn't really expecting, nor was I really sure I really wanted it that much. But we do get a couple of pages about Macy. The reason she left the band was not only because she hated that lifestyle, it wasn't really for her, she felt like she was pretending to be someone else, but it was mainly because she found this baby dragon and decided to raise it as her own. And then eventually Bruno did come and recruit her for the mission. It is nice though to get a bit of introspective into this character who, again, like I said, I wasn't expecting much on. Basically she believes that she felt inadequate, you know, among the rest of the Sessile Die Twice pop group. It wasn't the life for her. She didn't feel special in comparison to the rest of them, and she felt that getting this dragon, raising it as her own, almost like a child, would make her feel special, and I find that to be quite interesting. However, Bruno and Rickenbacker come crashing straight through the barrier. It's a really cool scene, to be fair. Noel and Ninnie obviously very, very shocked. And he basically says, he like I said earlier, he's riding the dragon. So is this his broom buggy? I would assume it probably is. But he's riding it, he's literally just kind of standing on it. The whole visual is really nice, actually. It looks really cool. But he says, you know, have you said your last goodbyes? So basically, Bruno ends the chapter by saying that they've committed an awful lot of crimes, but right now only one really matters. And he pulls out essentially a bounty for Balgo. Interestingly, I think the picture on the bounty is one of the images from the pilot chapter, at the very end of the chapter at least anyway. But Bruno says the bounty for Balgo is now officially out there. Every witch and wizard in reverse London is going to have their sights on him. This is really interesting. It's absolutely not the direction I thought it was going to go. I thought the Topplehorns were going to be kind of covert about their assassination on Balgo, but no, apparently it's a battle royale. Every witch and wizard in reverse London is going to want a piece of him, and they're going to come from all over the town. The chapter basically ends with Balgo innocently saying, wait, what's going on? Everyone's after me. And then you hear a distant rumbling, you know, ominous sounds for the future. Things are probably going to go down next week. But that is it for the end of the chapter. It looks like a standoff between Noel, Ninnie, Balgo, Macy, and then against the entirety of reverse London. I kind of like it. It's a neat way to finish this chapter and set up for the last one. Bruno's going to have to get in there quick if he really wants that recognition for killing Balgo, because it sounds like an awful lot of people are going to be showing up. I do kind of wonder just how much we're going to get out of next week's chapter, how satisfying the ending of this story actually will be. It really seems like the rest of the Topplehorns probably won't get a chance to do anything. I'm hoping we at least see them again one more time. Like I said, I predict that Billy will show up to lend his assistance to the rest of the Piper's gang. I think he'll probably be incredibly powerful and probably duke it out with Bruno or something like that. I think Sullivan might show up maybe, because that's the character again we've seen the most of apart from Bruno, and I really do get a Grimjo Ulquiorra vibe from them, a Basby Hashwolf vibe. Kubo loves that cliche, loves that trope, and I could absolutely see it happening here as well. But again, I just don't know where this is going to go. I don't know how this is going to end. You know, there's going to be some big showdown, you have to assume. They're going to be surrounded by loads and loads of witches and wizards. Maybe they'll make an escape. Maybe they'll stand and fight. Billy might arrive, try and hold everyone off. But really, you have to wonder, where's the out here? You know, Balgo has been exposed as a criminal and a terrorist to the entire of reverse London, even though he's not really. But everyone thinks that, and, you know, they're not just going to listen to Noel and Ninnie necessarily. So something interesting is going to happen here. You have to... I'm not entirely sure how Kubo's going to end this thing, with only one chapter left to go. So I'm really interested to read it, see exactly how it ends, and see if there really is any setup for a further series, because Kubo's introduced so many interesting characters and designs. It would be such a shame to never see any of them again. I think we would all love to see them again. And just make a bigger series out of this. You know, I know I'm asking Kubo to put in the work, but I know I'd love to see it. But that's it for this week's chapter, guys. It was my favourite one so far, and I'm going to give it a solid 4 out of 5. I'm really looking forward to things kicking it into overdrive next week, and we will see exactly how Burn the Witch, at least for now, wraps up. Alright guys, but if you like this video, make sure to hit the sub button, give the video a like, it really helps with the exposure as well for the channel, and just make sure you're subbed to my channel so you can stay up to date with all my Bleach and Burn the Witch videos. Until next time though guys, I shall catch you later. See you then.